this video, we are going to be working through example 8 in our chapter 4 notes. We are talking about the binomial distribution. And in this example, we are going to use what we just saw in the notes, which was about the expected value and the standard deviation of the binomial distribution. So example 8 is continuing from example 7. We're talking about an article in the Augusta Chronicle that talked about the name change of Georgia Regions University to Augusta University, and it said that 74% of people in the U.S. correctly place Augusta in Georgia. So first, we're going to answer the question out of a random sample of 20 people in the U.S. about how many would you expect to say that Augusta is in Georgia. So the main thing to notice here is that word expect. So that should make you think of the expected value. So the expected value, mu, in this case is just equal to n times p. N here is 20 and p was 0.74. So that gives us 14.8. So we would expect about 14 or 15 people to place Augusta in Georgia. Oops. Now, if you were doing this on a WebAssign, you would need to put in the exact value, the 14.8. If you were doing this on a test, I would see your calculations there. And so then if you made a statement about expecting 14 or 15 people, that would be good. Now second, we're going to find the standard deviation of the associated random variable. So we know that the standard deviation based on our formula is the square root of n times p times q. So in this case, that's going to be the square root of 20 times 0.74 times 0.26, the square root of all that. And if we put that into a calculator, we will get 1.96. And that's all that we need to do for part 2. Now for part 3, it asks us, would it be unusual for only 7 of the people, that is 7 of the people in our sample, to say that Augusta is in Georgia? Well, remember, when we're talking about unusual data, that means that we can consider something involving the standard deviation. Specifically, that would be more than 2 standard deviations away from the mean, mu. So we could look at mu minus 2 sigma to mu plus 2 sigma, that interval. In this case, that would be 14.8 minus 2 times 1.96 and 14.8 plus 2 times 1.96, which gives us the interval 10.88 to 18.72. Now notice we are asked if only 7 people say that Augusta in Georgia. Well, we would expect about 14 or 15 people to say place Augusta in Georgia, and 2 standard deviations away from that expectation gives us the interval from 10.88 to 18.72. And notice that 7 is outside this interval. So because of the fact that it is outside the interval, it means that it is more than 2 standard deviations away from the mean, which means it would be unusual. So yes, it would be unusual. Now, the last question we have for this example is, if only 7 say that Augusta is in Georgia, what would it make you think about the statement that 74% of people in the U.S. place Augusta in Georgia? Well, one thing we have to consider first off is our sample representative of the entire U.S.? Because notice we have a random sample of people in the U.S. So, is the sample representative of the US. Considering the fact that we only have 20 people, it might not be. Because it is only 20 people. But let's say we used some sampling techniques to spread those 20 people out throughout the whole US. We picked one person living in each state in the, every person we picked was living in a different state in the US, and we made sure those states were spread out through the US, something like that, so that the sample was at least geographically spread out so that it might be representative. So if it is representative, then that means we need to conclude something about this statement in the US. Now, if our sample is representative, so that 7 people placing Augusta in Georgia is correct or is reasonable, then that would mean, since it is unusual in comparison to this amount of information, that must mean that this information from the article might not be correct. So then the statistic in the article may not be correct. We don't have any information about how the Augusta Chronicle obtained this statistic. About 74% of the people in the US place Augusta in Georgia. Perhaps they sampled people that lived close to Augusta, Georgia, so then they would do that. However, if they had sampled people that were in Maine, then the people probably would have said that they would have placed Augusta in Maine instead of in Georgia, since there is an Augusta, Maine. So first off, we have to consider whether our sample is representative. If for some reason we know for sure that our sample is representative, then it must mean that the information that's in the article is not correct, or at least it gives us less confidence in what the article says. So less confidence in the article. Okay, and that wraps up our solution of this example.